Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host today, Samantha Studebaker Carl, and I'm here with my good friends Dan and Kenji and Lori and Jason. And today we're going to continue our discussion of the book Sacred Contracts by Caroline Myss. We are in chapter 3, which is the stages of a sacred contract. We're in the section titled Surrender. And we're kind of down in that section a little bit at the Buddha's contract. But before I get going reading that, I'm going to give my friends an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then I'll start reading.
Dan Sissick in Las Vegas.
Lori Edmonds in Denver.
Kenji and
sorry.
Hey, it's okay. Jason in Tampa.
I jumped the gun. Kenji and Gore, Maine. My apologies.
It's all good. It's all good.
It's
Jason,
right.
you're a little bit low.
I
Your
know.
volume.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go. The Buddha's contract. According to the Buddhist historians, the man known as Siddhartha Gautama was born in the 6th century before the Christian era in the foothills of the Himalayas, in what is now called Nepal. His father, Suddhodana, was the Raja or king of the Sakya clan of that region and member of the warrior caste. After the royal astrologer pronounced that his son would become either a great warrior king or a great spiritual leader, depending on how he reacted to the 4 signs, Suddhodana had a wall built around his estate to protect Siddhartha from having to view the harsh realities of old age, illness, and death. One day in his late 20s, Gautama managed to get out of the walled environment of the palace and roam the streets of his town to see how the people were living. It was then that he encountered the 4 signs that the astrologer had predicted would change his life. The sight of a decrepit old man, a sick man, a corpse, and a monk. Seeing the first 3, he realized that he also was subject to old age, disease, and death. But he noticed that the monk, amid the disintegration of life, looked serene. At that point, Gautama renounced all attachment to the physical world, stating that worldly happiness is transitory. How could he enjoy his life if he knew that someday he would get old, sick, and then die? Soon afterwards, at the age of 29, Gautama said a silent goodbye to his young wife and infant son and left home and went looking for a spiritual teacher. He is said to have worked with 2 primary teachers in different forms of meditation that were practiced at the time in India. Gautama mastered both forms and quickly ascended to the position of teacher himself, but ultimately he found that the techniques did not produce the state of complete freedom from desire that he thought. He then undertook yogi practices as well as pranayama, which is breath control, and severe austerities with a group of 5 disciplines. Determined to attain enlightenment by practicing self-mortification, is that what that says? Self-mortification. Gautama abstained from food almost entirely, eventually becoming frail and weak. Finally, he reached the conclusion that extremes of self-denial would eventually end in death and a resumption of the endless wheel of samsara, birth, death, and rebirth. Recalling a state of blissful tranquility and freedom from desires that he once experienced as a child sitting under a tree and watching his father plow, he went and sat under a large tree that became known as the Bodhi, or Bo tree, the tree of enlightenment. Aware that he needed to recover his strength, he accepted a bowl of rice and yogurt from a village woman named Sujata, who happened to be fulfilling an offering vow she had made in gratitude for the birth of her child. Siddhartha remained underneath the tree from early morning to sunset, maintaining a fierce resolve to find an answer to human suffering. He would rather perish than get up from his seat until he received full illumination. Plunging himself into deep meditation, by nightfall he had entered into a superconscious state of illumination that is said to have lasted 49 days. Gautama became fully enlightened and at last discovered the state of being for which he had been searching. The state was accompanied by the insights that became the center of his teachings. The Buddha didn't believe in a supreme being along the lines of Yahweh, Allah, or Brahma, the god of Hindu belief, but he did accept these presences of many lesser, he did accept the presence of many lesser deities, such as the creator god Brahma. These deities lived in a blissful realm that lacked only one thing, the ability to become enlightened. And yet, although he would not have acknowledged making contact with the divine, the Buddha did establish contact with a universal level of wisdom and insight that transcends ordinary human awareness and qualifies as the first stage of a sacred contract. According to legend, during the lengthy meditation and enlightenment process, Gautama, now the Buddha, Sanskrit for the awakened one, was tempted by Mara, death, the evil one, in various guises. Mara was afraid that Buddha now had the insight to escape death's realms and so tried to frighten and intimidate him by unleashing an army of fearful demons. But the Buddha was supported by the grace of merit he had accumulated in his past lives and was not frightened off. Buddhist scholars Richard H. Robertson and Willard L. Johnson pick up the story. Then Mara, having failed with intimidation and compulsion, turned to temptation. He sent his 3 daughters, Discontent, Delight, and Desire, to seduce the future Buddha, who remained as impervious to lust as he had to fear. As the sun set, Mara and his hosts gave up and withdrew. This temptation episode is quite a late addition to Buddhist text and entirely mythical. The myth, though, is a suitable expression of experience common to most contemplatives. The seeker eventually is committed to an integral attempt, overcomes doubt and inertia, and sets to work. This conjures up the demons of fear from the unconscious. All the habit-hardened dispositions protest against their coming destruction. But good habits sustain the seeker's resolve. The waves of fear pass, the doubts arise about whether the candidate is really equal to the challenge. If the seeker possesses genuine self-confidence, the doubts are vanquished. The last peril is, of course, the rosiest and the deadliest. Perfect love may cast out of fear, but as all too easily changes into personal pleasure. According to tradition, the Buddha had seen all his rebirths on the wheel of existences, going back to the animal kingdom, including a past life as a stag who gave his life to save the herd. He had realized the tragedy of identifying with ego as separate from everyone and everything else. Seeing ourselves as separate from the outside world gives rise to passionate craving, hatred, and ignorance. These forms of attachment are the principal causes of suffering. Tradition has it that even after his enlightenment, the Buddha was tempted further by Mara to keep his liberating insight to himself and continue to realize the bliss of nirvana, casting off his body and foregoing returning to the physical world. The gods were so disturbed by this prospect that they sent Brahma, the Hindu deity of creation, to convince Buddha to go and teach what he had learned. The Buddha heeded the call to wander the land, begging food and shelter with his band of itinerant monks and teaching in the vernacular to men and women of all castes. A radical approach at odds with the social mind caste and castes of the laws, or a radical approach at odds with the social mindset and caste laws of his day. He was 35 when he achieved enlightenment and assumed the name Buddha, and he spent the next 45 years teaching the insights he had learned in deep stillness under the Bodhi tree. Like Moses, who wandered in the desert with the Israelites for 40 years before he died and his people were allowed to enter the promised land, the Buddha taught his vision, settled disputes among his followers, and wandered the forests of northern India. The challenges and opportunities that the Buddha faced during his 6 years of preparation and even during his great enlightenment experience itself were not the last he had to deal with. Throughout the rest of his life, he carried out numerous assignments regarding his teaching and the orders of monks and nuns he founded. According to Buddhist legend, his life ended when he visited a smith and accepted some tainted food rather than offend the host. As the lives of Abraham, Jesus, and Muhammad, Gautama the Buddha had to enter into fullness of his sacred contract over time, first by being mentored and then by undergoing tests that had challenged the strength of his soul over the force of his ego. He decided to go, his decision to forego both extreme asceticism and self-indulgence for a more moderate existence, which he called the middle way, was the key to his finally achieving enlightenment. No effort by itself can induce the process of soul clarity. We may choose to engage in the discipline, but the divine chooses when we will be given sight. The Buddha's convention-breaking approach to teaching the spiritual path lives on a number of modern teachers who have applied the principles he discovered 2,500 years ago to vastly different challenges of modern life. The lives of renowned American Buddhist teachers such as Pema Chodron, Charlotte Jobeck, and Bernie Glassman continue to prove that the contracts of even the most accomplished spiritual masters are not always apparent to them from the beginning. Glassman, for example, was born in Brooklyn, New York, to marginally observant Jewish parents and was only mildly interested in religion growing up. His real passion was for mathematics and engineering, which led to a career in aerospace industry, working at McDonnell Douglas on weather and communication satellites and a project to develop interplanetary handbooks, charts showing the optimum times to launch flights to Mars and the outer planets. But he gradually became fascinated with Zen Buddhism and developed his practice over time until it became more important to him than his aerospace work. After years of study with the great Japanese master Maezumi Roshi, Glassman was ordained a Zen priest in 1980 and founded the Zen Center, New York. Almost from the beginning, his Zen practices were controversial. He created a bakery business in a rundown area of Yonkers that became so successful at the center, was able to purchase a $600,000 mansion with the profits. But Glassman also had an innate concern for issues of social justice, instilled in him by his socialist relatives. After a time, he sold the mansion with its elegant zendo, or meditation hall, and used the money to start a program to create housing for the homeless in the area. While moving the zendo to the top floor of the bakery, right next to a noisy all-night bar frequented by prostitutes and drug dealers. Glassman later established an interfaith center and living quarters for people with HIV/AIDS, founded by a Zen peacemaker order dedicated to the cause of world peace, and led Zen retreats in the death camps of Auschwitz and Buchenwald. But at the height of his success, even with these unconventional projects, Glassman left the Zen Center and headed west with his wife, also a Zen monk, to set up a new center in Santa Fe. Just a short time after arriving there, Glassman's wife suffered a stroke and died. Glassman took to the road once more, continuing to seek a path that best fit his unique gifts. Okay, that's where I'm going to end. I'm starting to get my tongue tied. So, all right. Any thoughts on all of that?
There's a lot there, and it's there were lots of little pieces and little things, but to me in some ways parts of it felt disjointed. I don't know if, it's, I don't know.
Maybe it's all of us because we are not enlightened.
Well, okay, yeah, that might be, um, maybe I don't understand a lot of, I've done some meditation, but I've not gotten deep into it compared to, but I think there is a lot to be said about, getting in connection or communing or oneness with God, the universe, infinite intelligence, and I think we can achieve parts of that, but I think our minds are what, going back to kind of what we were talking about earlier before we started, how our mind can take something and run with it and focus on it, even though we try hard to bring it back to a more middle or positive side. And I think that's the part I get out of it, I think, is that I think everybody wants to really have that. I don't want to use the word Zen, but that experience of where they're in, I don't even want to say necessarily happy, but in um similar to happy and bliss, but but the term I'm trying to come up with doesn't come to my mind right now. But that sense of, I guess, better understanding of why things happen, maybe, I guess.
I was just looking at this next section in here, and it kind of brings all of these little stories together. And I'm kind of wondering if I should just go ahead and read that, because it kind of sums up this chapter. And what do you think?
If your tang is untangled,
Do what?
if your tongue is untangled, but I said tang is untangled.
If my tongue is untangled, or was it getting hard to understand because my tongue was getting too?
No. That's just what you felt. So if you're not confident reading, that's what will
No,
happen.
we were fine,
Okay.
Yeah,
and
you were fine.
Okay.
but you're the one who kind of thought that, so
Right.
So-
let me go forward with it. We'll finish this section because
okay.
I feel like this is it's not that far from the end of the chapter for one, so we may as well get to the end. And then I'll sum up why we were talking about all these different stories anyway. Okay, so this part is called the Unified Message of Ongoing Guidance. Abraham, Jesus, Muhammad, and the Buddha shared an awakening process that is the archetypal journey. The progression they experienced as they moved into their enlightenment corresponds to the stages through which each of us will pass at one time or another, for it appears that this is the way the journey is written. Even the small fragments of their histories presented here suggest quintessentially
Quintessentially.
There we go.
Quintessentially.
Thank you, Lori. Quintessentially human profiles rather than lives that needed to be spiritual instruction, introspection, prayer, or self-discipline. And we can find similar profiles in the lives of more recent mystics such as Hilda Charlton and Bernie Glassman. By comparing our own doubts, questions, fears, and reluctance with theirs, We can see the archetypal roadmap created by their spiritual awakenings is already at work within us. We may not yet have progressed as far as they, but we are on the same path. They do not exist in some stratosphere impossibly high above us, beyond our reach. Each of these spiritual masters had a moment in which his soul was called forth and the deeper significance of his life was revealed to him. Each in his own way required guidance and education, and each was brought to a series of surrender points, tested to see if his faith had become stronger than his need for earthly power. Upon completing these stages of spiritual awakening, they all maintained a profound spiritual practice while teaching those around them. Even after his enlightenment, for instance, the Buddha is said to have continued to meditate daily. Jesus and Muhammad also prayed up until the end of their lives, and Abraham ever performed rituals of his nascent religious tradition. Our pathways, like theirs, has assignments and tests, each one part of a spiritual learning process that is meant to help us move through our illusions about the relative merit of external power and inner power. We need never feel either that we have too far to travel or that we have already arrived and can stop practicing the everyday virtues of compassion and mindfulness. There is one final and most important lesson to be gleaned from observing these lives. Along the way, each spiritual master was contracted to meet not only his most faithful disciples, but also those who would bring out his own shadows and fears, the petty tyrants I mentioned earlier. Each had to experience resistance and betrayal. This is especially true in the case of Jesus, who was betrayed by one of his closest disciples, and Muhammad, who was to wage war against elements of Arabic society that wanted to stop Islam before it spread its radical social reforms. And there is evidence that even the Buddha, who lived a relatively tranquil life of itinerant preaching, had a blind spot regarding the role of women in the spiritual order he sought to establish. He felt that women's sexuality represented a threat to the celibacy and the serenity of his monks, and that even if women devoted themselves to the same austere life, they would soon abandon it. So he initially resisted the idea of allowing women to form monastic orders. But his foster mother, Prajapi, who had cared for the Buddha when his own mother died shortly after giving birth, and Ananda, one of his closest disciples, argued the point with him, exposing the Buddha's shadow in this area, and they finally convinced him to accept women as nuns. The great religious teachers had to find their sacred contracts in order to overcome their own limitations, fears, and shadows. You and I may never become fully realized beings, at least in this lifetime, but all we actually need to do is strive to realize our fullest divine potential. That may not be the same potential as that of the masters we've been studying. It may be less, or it may even more, but it's our potential, and that's all that is expected of us. The lives of these four great spiritual masters provide a roadmap for charting the stages of our own spiritual transformation. In Chapter 6, we will look at another kind of map, one that charts the structure and flow of energy within our body and spirit through the centers of psychospiritual energy known as chakras. In Chapter 7, we will work yet another map in the form of cosmic wheel that helps you chart the significance of your personal team of archetypes. Together, these maps will allow you to interpret the meaning of your contract and see your life in an entirely new way. But before we go any further, we'll first need to explore the nature of archetypes and their role in your life. Okay. So I feel like that kind of summed everything up in terms of why were we reading about these different these different spiritual leaders. And from what I'm gathering from this chapter is the whole point of it was so that we can understand how different individuals, particularly ones that were called to great acts of service in their life, I guess you could say, called to be teachers of these spiritual practices, how they also went through the struggles that we go through on a daily basis, and how they still were able to surrender, quote unquote, to their sacred contract and be able to live that out for the rest of their lives. But they still had struggles. And so I think that's a big part of it, is just recognizing now we all go through struggles, right? We struggle with our financial lives, we struggle in our family lives, with our relationships and our careers and our what do we do with ourselves, kind of, you know, all these different things. And so then we can kind of compare our own struggles to the struggles of the spiritual leaders. And that is kind of the point of that section, I believe. Is that we can allow ourselves to follow the spiritual path, but recognize also that we still are going to have struggles in life, and that yeah. What do you guys think?
I keep hearing the words compare and compete, comparison, and I just don't think that helps us. I can't compare myself to anyone else or whatever their journey was. It's not the same. As much as we are the same, we are all individuals. And ego and emotions and our energies really have an impact and influence on your response and reaction.
Yeah, I think I agree, you know, there with Lori on that while I think everybody goes through similar struggles with, you know, aspects of their life, because, you know, I think everybody struggles a little bit with financial issues or health issues or this or that, or, you know, or even personal, you know, doubts or depression and stuff. But it's kind of the same, but it's different because of each one's own perspective and where they're at and how they deal with it and how they respond and where they are in their, I'll say, faith journey, however their faith plays out, whatever they believe or whatever they are working towards and trying to achieve for their life. Because I think we're all working and trying to achieve that level of, I'm going to say, peace, because that works best for me, you know, where I feel like I can, like for me, where I can be ready to handle if something comes up unexpected and not have to look at it like, oh my God, now this is just an added, rather is this, okay, this is another part of the journey, but it's not gonna, I have the means and the resources available to handle it. Whereas right now, I think in a lot of ways, personally, I still don't feel like I have that state of where whatever gets thrown at me, I can say, okay, I'm good. You know, I can handle it and move forward. But that's my personal way of how I'm looking at it. And somebody else like, you know, Kenji in his situation with what he goes through, or Jason or you or Catherine or, you know, Lori, you know, we all have different things we're going through. And while we can still understand and have empathy and sympathy for whatever, it's not you're not going through the exact situation that person. So I think in moving towards, I guess, enlightenment for lack of a better term, is a journey that everybody is on, and it's finding those aspects that are out there that are available or there for us to use, or I'm not sure where I'm trying to go with that, but to get to our own sense of I'm okay, I guess, or I'm not sure. I'm kind of rambling now because my thoughts are kind of.
I find it fascinating the point where each of these characters get um, to the position where they make that change, or they decide to make a change, and they make a decision to go a different direction. And 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 it seems like you said, Dan, everyone's trying to find their own bit of peace in their life and moving forward with it so that they have a way to look forward to every day and feel competent in handling whatever comes at them, in a good way. Um, and I see what Lori's saying about, we're all different. We are a product of our upbringing, of course, and our environment to a great extent. And I think that's a lot of what she's talking about. Um, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that is, that's true. But it kind of brings me to that, when connecting that the will that these people are having to make the change, it is, they first have to realize that there is something profoundly different than what they first perceived, or what their beliefs have been, and they want to make that change. So they have to reach that point. You reach the point where you realize, I am different than, I'm different than everyone, and that's normal. But at the same time, there is a different way of looking at things, and to the point where I can correct my thought patterns and correct my belief system, um, enough to where I can correct um, the actions that are keeping me from obtaining that peace that I'm looking for. Then then if you feel like you're not happy where you are, you have to be willing to make a change, and not knock down every um uh, opportunity, not pick apart every opportunity to make that change. You have to be willing to kind of go for it, and because otherwise it's like that example that they teach everywhere, about cooking the ham with by cutting off the ends, and in order to cook the ham, and then you that's just the way it's always been done, and you find out later that it was the only reason that they cut off the ends was not so they could cook it better, was just because so it would fit in the darn pot. And it's like, if you're not willing to, if you're always trying to find a reason why the suggestions won't work for you, um in your specific case, because we're each so different. And in my case, it's not going to work for me for this, that, or the other reason. And then it's kind of like you're recognizing that, okay, well, we only cut off the ends to fit it in the pot, but still I can't cook my ham without cutting off the ends no matter what. I'm still going to do it. And I'm still going to throw that away, throw that extra ham away and whatever whatever that amounts to. But it's kind of being, I don't know if it's a correct word, is being like um, resistant or obstinate or whatever, but against, like, it's like I want this thing, but
Conformist.
I'm not willing to do it. What's that?
I said a conformist.
No, like you're rejecting, just resistant of the idea. Like sometimes I'll listen to these audios or whatever, and it will be like, oh, that's a good way to frame this, or it's a good way to think about something. But then my mind, I can tell my mind's like putting up a wall. It doesn't want to accept it, and of course that affects my belief level in it. And I mean, if you can't 100% believe in the thing that you need to do in order to get where you want to get, then it's gonna be a struggle, as you mentioned, a struggle. You're putting these things in front of you because you're just not willing to believe, or you're just not willing to be open and actually do the thing. Does that make sense? I mean, yeah. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Conform to the idea.
Not
It's always
conform.
a yeah, but
No, I think what he's getting at is in that story he was talking about the ham, but I always heard it as like a turkey. Um that, and it started out with like the great grandmother cutting it off so it would fit in the pot, but then the daughter, you know, as she grew up, that's how she saw her mom do it. So that's the way she did it. And then her daughter did the same thing, because that's, rather than going back and asking, well, why did you do that in the first place? And finally somebody did ask. And sometimes maybe that's part of the problem. We don't ask the right questions, or going back to what Jason was saying, we are not willing to go and make the changes that we know we probably need to make, going back to what Smith was saying earlier before we got on about how to reframe it and we look at it, and going back to what we say to ourselves when we talk to ourselves. Sometimes we're so, and I'm going to use the word comfortable with our skin the way it is, that we don't want to make that change. And I think deep down, maybe we don't necessarily want to change and grow, even though we're telling ourselves we do. And I think that maybe some aspects, I think we all do it to ourselves at times. And I know I have, and I know maybe within this last go around the things I've been dealing with, maybe I've gotten so comfortable with that, well, it's what I'm comfortable with, what I dealt with is, and I know how to react, and I know how to deal with this in my own sphere of things, even though I don't like the feeling, even though I don't like the stress and the pressure and how it makes me feel. But am I willing to maybe change my thoughts and what I say, and say, okay, this too is just another bump, and let me focus on this side of it where I'm not experiencing this, or I'm not experiencing that, or I've still got this to do. I can still go do that. And I think that's the point I'm getting out of it. But yeah, maybe, and going back to what Lori said, it might be a little bit of conformity. Well, this is how mom did it. This is how, or this is how my family, we get into family rituals and things and this and that. And well, this is how we've always done it. But who says you always have to do it that way? And how, And
I got a
that might be
comment
part of
on that. On that, okay, so we have this thing where, okay, we're talking about this is how the family has always done it, right? We're looking at that as an external thing. We have that going on in our brain too, because that was what we were talking about before we jumped on here, is how I'm wondering if a lot of our thought processes, well, I mean, wondering is probably not accurate. I'm confident that a lot of our thought processes are these neuro pathways that we've created over time, our habitual responses is the same as that. This is the way it's always been done. On our brain, the brain's going, this is the way it's always been done. I don't want to change. It's too hard. It's, all of these things. You're asking me to do something different than what I've done all along, and that's hard, right? So we have to recognize that that's what's going on, and we can recognize that, then we can actually work on making those changes. It's like developing a new habit. So if every time something happens, we have this reactionary response that is upset and is and just starts focusing on all the things that are going wrong, and all the things that we're upset about, all the things that we're frustrated about, all the things that we're going to have to deal with, and all of that. That is a habitual response to a crisis, right? Whereas we can start working on changing those neuro pathways so that when a crisis happens, is that we can respond in a different way. And that's an effort. That is something we have to work on. And so then we also have this mumbo jumbo in our brains. It's like, well, I don't want to work harder. I'm already working hard enough. I don't want to have to do more. And yet we also know that anytime we want to make a change in our life, it is an amount of work that we have to do. And so that, I think we get caught up in that, right? So it is kind of this whole thing that they're talking about with sacred contract, is that we go through these stages and then we're faced at the end. Which direction are we going to go? Are we going to just keep going down the path that we're going down, getting the same results, or are we going to make that effort and follow this new pathway, whether it's spiritual or whether it's just a new pathway in our lives where we're trying to accomplish something different? So I feel like we can keep going down the same path and have the same things happen to us and keep having the same response, or we can make a choice and choose a new path. And yeah, it's going to take a little bit of effort because we've got these kind of dug in paths that we've been walking for a while. We're going to have to step out of our rut, right? And we're going to have to try and walk a new path. And that's going to be a little bit of a struggle for a while until we make a rut in that way. We make a new path,
Yeah.
right?
It's very hard to go against the grain.
But
Well, it's your
It's
own
hard. It
brain,
is. That's what
even
we're
too,
talking
it's
about.
like our own thing.
What's
And
that? There's the book from a while back. Now I never read it, but I always was fascinated with the title. It had something to do with taking the road less traveled.
yeah,
And that's what we're talking about here, is taking the road less traveled. And
but
I don't know. I mean,
but going back to what you were saying and what she's talked about in the book, the sacred contract, and all the four people that she was just speaking about, especially this last guy, where he said he saw, an elderly man, death, dying, and he saw that, and that just totally, he's like, no, I don't want it to live that, or, and the thing is, none of us want to die. We all know that we're gonna die, and we understand that. But he sought out on a way to try and find something that, to me, gave him peace about getting to that point to where he could feel like, I think maybe more like he was in control of it, so to speak, I guess, or
maybe that he's just thinking about the positives of getting old. I don't know. I mean,
whatever it was, there was more to life than
he was
what he was
accepting
doing.
that as a part of life, and then working from You know, I mean, it is what it is. We're all going to die, right? We're all going to get old. We're all going to start, you know, our bodies aren't going to function the way that we used to. We struggle with that every day, right? You know, some of us more than others. And and how do we react to that? We can wallow in our own whanny nanny and be upset about it because and be mad that we can't change it, or we can take what it is and think about the things that are good about our situation in our life right now. And I think that is a very difficult thing. Or I don't want to say it's very difficult. I want to say we struggle with that because we don't want to accept, we don't want to surrender to what is. We want it to be something other than what it is.
Right.
And, you know, like when we were talking
Well,
before we
obviously,
got,
and that's like the hardest. I mean, you're taking an extreme example too, you know, having to deal with, you know, your that you're going to die. I mean, that's I like to start on something a little bit less.
let's start on something easier than
I
death.
mean, that's like, come on. I mean, I'm just trying to look forward to tomorrow, and that we're
Yeah,
gonna have, you know, gonna be more successful tomorrow than I am today, type of thing. Just,
right.
you know.
Yeah. Well, sure, but I mean, if we're talking about everything that leads up to the end, right? And everything in our life can either be a struggle or it can be something that we enjoy. And or we can find the good in whatever we're struggling with, because that's a big part of it. I mean, if we sit here and we just wallow in our own whanny nanny every time anything happens to us, then that's what our
Uh-huh.
life is going to be. It's going to be a bunch of whanny nanny, and we'll be. I used to, I used to talk about
What
calling
that
out
is
the
funny.
wambulance. You know, do I need to call out the wambulance for you? You know, that's what we're talking about here. Do we want to be living in this feeling of whanny nanny for the rest of our lives, or can we look at each thing that comes up in a day and find the good about whatever it is? You know, so
So kind of looking for that, lack of a better term, zen in each and every aspect
circumstance,
of
yeah.
what comes up, and how, and that's, in a lot of ways, I think, you're partially right. I think we all do that to ourselves, and we all kind of, you know, um, and I think I hate to say this because I do it myself sometimes. I think I like to wallow in it because I want everybody else to, I hate to admit this, kind of feel sorry for me,
Yeah.
no. And I think we all do it too because we're like, oh, but then when I look at the people that are dealing with cancer at my church, and I'm just like, wait a minute, and if I change that around and going back to like what, the Buddha guy, he saw what he, as the kid, oh, that guy's old. Well, that guy's, you know, sickly, and then there's
But he
death.
still saw the guy that even though he was sickly and old, he still was at peace. And
Right.
that was what he recognized. He didn't at first, but then he did. He was like, huh, I want that. I want to be at peace in whatever's happening.
And is that what most of us are missing?
Is that what we're
Seeing that
struggling with?
peace in the midst of what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that we don't have that peace in the midst of what's going on. I think that's what we all want.
There was a movie a while ago. I don't remember what movie it was, and it was Morgan Freeman. He's standing in this like warehouse building, and he's mopping the floor, but he was playing God in that moment. And you probably know what I'm talking about if you've seen the movie. And he was he was showing how there's peace in everything by doing this mopping. One person could be upset about having to mop this entire floor of a building, and yet he's showing how finding that peace in that moment is what the meaning is all about. It's not about whether you're mopping and having to mop over and over and over again. It's to find that peace in that moment. And I think that's where we struggle more often than not is finding the peace in whatever it is that we're going through in any given time, because it always seems like there's a crisis happening, or there's always an argument happening, or there's a frustration, or there's, whatever it is. And we're focused on that. We're focusing on mopping the floor instead of the peace that we can find within that, or whatever. I don't know. So guys, I got to jump off. Oh, okay. Bruce Almighty, Evan Almighty. Yeah. The ones that I think that was what I think it was the Bruce Almighty one, because it was the one with Carey. What's his name?
Jim Carrey.
Jim
but
Carrey.
I looked it up. He was in both.
He was who? Morgan Freeman was in both?
Yep. I
Oh,
looked
that's
it up.
right. He was Evan Almighty. It was Evan Almighty. Is that the one with gosh, what's his name?
Steve Carell.
Yeah.
Carroll, and he built the ark in his backyard.
Yep.
Super
Yep.
good.
Okay. Right.
Yep.
Mike
Okay.
the old great Smiter. Oh God, that was so funny.
Yeah.
They're both funny characters. All right. Well, guys, I got to get off. If you want to keep on talking, I'll just jump off and leave one of you on here.
No. No. Look forward to next week, and
Right.
I need to change my mindset a little bit this week.
Here, let me end the recording real quick, and then I got to talk to you about something. Okay. For those of you who are watching, please like this video, share it, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get updated every time we upload a new video. And with that, I'm going to say have a happy and amazing week. Look at the positive instead of the negative. See what you can find in the moment that gives you peace and happiness versus causes you to be frustrated and upset. And with that, I'll say that's it. Have a great day. We'll see you next time on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.